and I have both virtual reality headsets. The dawn of VR is here. We have the Oculus Rift and the HTC VIVE. Now, there's been plenty of comparison videos of these headsets. Unfortunately, I think some of them missed out key points that we're going to try and cover in this video in a sort of non-biased, hypercritical look at the two headsets. Now, we're going to start off with basic comfort and actually placing the headsets on, because there's no use having a VR headset that's a pain in the arse to put on your head. So we'll start off with the Rift, and you can see, well, as I catch the cable on my ear, that was actually quite skillful. Start off with the Rift, and you can just pop it on your head like this, and once you've got used to this and you've done it, say maybe 10 or 15 times, it's very easy to hook it from the back and place it over the front. Now, once you've got the Rift on your face, you do notice that though the sweet spot is ginormous compared to the DK2, you do have to do a little bit of tilting and adjustment of the actual headset itself by grabbing the front of it to get right in the middle. And although the sweet spot in terms of focus is a lot better than the Rift, I have noticed that if you aren't really precise in the middle, when it comes to rotating your face and looking up and down, you're not in the right place for the lenses in terms of distortion of the image. And what that means is that if you've got, say, especially when it's on interfaces and in some games, if you're not got your eyes bang smack in the middle, when you rotate, stuff tends to warp a bit, as if you were looking through a bit of distorted glass, for example, or a little bit like a stained glass window. Not that extreme, but things bend a little bit when you turn around, which makes you feel, doesn't make you feel sick, but it's off, and you sort of notice it. If you've got one of these, and you do notice it, I'm ruining this for people that have got Rifts now. When you do notice it, it actually gets quite annoying because you'll start seeing things bend and move. But as I say, once you get it on in the right place, you can adjust it nicely because it does have a tilt on the front of the headset that lets you actually move it up and down once it's there on your face, which is really nice. And once it is in place and you've got it in the right spot, it stays there. So it's good in that sense that once you've got it right, you're fine, but you do have to fiddle with it. Even though the actual getting it on your head is very fast and simple, you do have to do this little adjustment jiggle each time for it to be spot on and not get that bendiness of it, if you will. Now, taking it off and popping on the Vive. Now, it's worth saying, I've had both these set up for a long time now. I've been going between the two and using games that support both of them, like Live for Speed and Elite Dangerous, and swapping over, mixing and matching to make this video to have a good idea of the differences between the two devices. Now, the Vive, in terms of plopping it on your head, again, well, with the Vive actually, I found the technique is to hold it with one hand here and hold the front with one hand here, and then you sort of put it on like that and shift it over. You do get into sort of a way of putting the Vive on, but it's not as immediately easy to place on your head as the Rift. And something that seems to happen quite a lot with the Vive is that the cables at the top ride up, which means you'll go to put it on sometimes and the cables have pulled down or moved around, and then you can't actually get it into the right space that you've got set up. So you have to be aware of that before you put it on and sort of give the cables a little bit of a tug on here. But you know that the cables are really solid. I don't think it's going to damage them. It's just a little bit of a niggle. Once you sort of get over the Vive's somewhat quirky way of placing it on your face, the actual sweet spot, I would argue, is better than the Rift. Now, not in the sense of where it's most in focus. I think they're about the same in terms of you need your eyes pretty much in a fairly central area to get stuff in focus and be able to see things clearly. But what the Vive doesn't seem to suffer from that the Rift does is if you're not in the right spot centrally or perfect, you don't get as much bending distortion when you rotate your head on stuff in the interface. So when you're looking at the Steam menu or you're looking at a menu in game or very defined geometric objects in game, even if you've not got your face in exactly the right place and you rotate, stuff doesn't bend and warp. So I think the lenses accommodate you a bit better with the Vive in terms of immediately placing it on, and there you are. Now I noticed this with my partner as well. When I put the Rift on her head, I have to readjust both of them to get it because she's got a tiny skull She's clearly unevolved, whereas I've got a giant skull. Actually, it's back to front. I'm the unevolved one. She's more evolved. She's all sleek. I'm like a Neanderthal. But with her, I have to readjust both headsets. It's a little bit of a faff. But she has the same thing. When I put this on her head with the Vive, she's pretty much good to go, and she jumps in and plays audio surf. No real issues. Sometimes you have to give it a little bit of a woggle, but you know, once it's on, it's on. And she doesn't have a trouble with that. With the Rift, she has to fiddle with it a little bit more to get it right in the sweet spot. You know, to get it so it's just clear and you don't get any of that bending. Now, another thing we noticed with the Rift and the Vive in terms of putting them on your head, the Vive does a better job of blocking out all light around you. Once it's on your face, there's literally no light leakage at all. You're basically blocked off from the world around you. So really, your house could burn down. You might feel a bit of warmth, but you're not going to notice until it's too late and you've got 3rd-degree burns. With the Rift, however, when you pop it on, actually my new technique now is to actually hook this on my ear each time. I don't normally do that. I wouldn't say that's a problem. That's just me being special for this video. When you pop it on, there is, despite myself having an absolutely ginormous snout, quite a big gap where the nose is. Now, this gap is useful when you want to look at your keyboard, but when you want to be totally immersed in virtual reality and you don't want to remind you of how pathetic your existence is in reality, you don't want that gap there. So I think the Rift has somewhat failed with the nose piece design there, though I'm sure because the fascias, like on the Vive and the Rift, the actual foam can be changed, and maybe with the VR cover put on, which we should get soon, so we'll be reviewing that separately. But I'd assume that you could probably improve that yourself to some extent. I don't really find, for me, I don't find it that much of a problem with the Rift, but it is better on the Vive, and my partner noticed it more than me. She seemed more concerned with it. I don't know why, but for me that's not really an issue, but you can see some light leakage out of the bottom. In terms of, the last of all with the comfort, the headphones actually on the Rift are really well done. In that, when you do put it on, obviously the headphones plop over your ears, you can adjust them just right, and they float on your ears, and you sort of forget that they're there. Again, they don't isolate the world around you because they're not earbud ears, or they're not as, you know, they don't isolate you in the same way that overhead ears would do that are closed earphones. But when you're listening to stuff, they go very loud, good sound quality, and it's immediate. So you just put it on, bang, you sort of in a little shuffle, get the image right, and you're in VR with your sound all done. Whereas with the Vive, I don't know how many times I'm going to take them on and off in this video. This is going to be a record. With the Vive, you put it on, and you have to sort of give it a squiggle. You have to check the top cable, as we talked about before. Then you have to do the earbud hunt. It's like Easter, but for headphones, which are inevitably the earbuds have tangled around the rear cable. And then you have to do the finger fiddle to find the right one, which is the one with the little square on it. And then you drop them because you're so excited for virtual reality. And then you plop them in your ear, and you have to give them a rotate. And there you go. You're now in VR with your headphones. Now, because these are in-ear earbuds, although they have to get in, once they're in your ears, again, your house could burn down around you and you'd be fine. You wouldn't hear it, you wouldn't see it, it would just get warmer. You'd assume you'd been extra vigorous in your VR games and you'd have 3rd-degree burns and it'd all be okay. But as I say, with the earbuds, what they do is they isolate you. Again, making the Vive way more isolating. And I don't know if it really adds that much to the VR experience, but you do very much lose yourself in VR with the Vive, I think, even when sat down, because you're completely blocked out from the environment, for better or worse. Depends if your house is on fire. In terms of the actual earbud quality, these are fantastic, really nice and bassy. They'll probably make you deaf in a couple of years, so you know, it's like when you listen to music on any earbud headphones, you've got to be careful you don't pump it up too much. And that you don't keep increasing the volume. Really nice bass, because these are going right into your eardrums, as I say, causing permanent hearing damage. Whereas the Rift earbuds, Not as bassy and not as isolating, but perfectly fine quality earphones. For reference, my normal headphones are Sennheiser 595s, and they're so comfortable, and I use them every day, and I've even slept in them before. And no, in terms of comfort, these headphones are probably better than the earbuds. But if you're used to earbuds and you can get over that, in terms of bass and isolation, I think the earbuds are better. But then obviously you've got that whole fiddle, the arse of getting them in your ears in the first place. But you do get better at putting them in. But it is a fiddle, and you can take them out though and put your own headphones in here. But I mean, what is that about? It looks like an unhappy sort of futuristic creature that's escaped a genetic modification there. But you can put them on, there you go, and you're done. So I think that covers the basics of the actual putting them on and getting into VR. And we have talked a little bit about the lenses, but let's go a little bit more into the differences between the screens, the visual appearance, and the lenses themselves. To start off that journey, the Ipd adjustment. On the Vive, you've got this little twiddly knob thing that's really good at doing precise Ipd adjustment. Now, because the sweet spot on the Vive is so big, if you're, for some reason, maybe I'm genetically modified, but for some reason I can put this down really far without it not making that much of an impact, and it's very subtle, but it does come in handy and it is really useful. I noticed with my partner, she has to have it right down in the six, like I think it's 60 millimeters, whereas I'm more 67, 70 millimeters. And it's really quick to rotate it and get it in the right place and be happy with it. And it shows you on the screen exactly what you've set, which is nice and just convenient. And it's immediately apparent what you need to do, and it's very easy to be precise with it. When it's on your face, you can very easily just twiddle it. And I think that's really nicely done, in my opinion. So if we go over to the Oculus Rift, its IP adjustment is done with this... let's see if I can get it in the light so you guys can see it a bit. There you go. Its Ipd adjustment is with this little slider thing with a button on it. You push the button down and you move it forwards and backwards. And it's not very precise, but it does seem to move a lot more. And with the Rift, I think, again, because the lenses, I don't know if it's a smaller sweet spot or just how they are, I found you do have to get this, I do have to adjust this for definite when I'm swapping between this and my partner, otherwise I'm going buzz-eyed. It's harder to be ultra precise with it. I don't think you need to be absolutely precise with it. What is nice with the Rift though when it comes to Ipd is they have a calibrator that's in the menu. It's just a green cross, sort of cross that you then with it on your face, and you make sure the pixels are all sharp, and that's very easy to set up and use, and works fantastic. So again, I think the Vive's Ipd adjustment is better than the Rift's, but then the Rift has a little calibrator that's really nice for making sure it is absolutely crisp in the center. Okay, so separate from the Ipd and the general sweet spot, the one thing which a lot of people have talked about and is very noticeable between the two headsets with the lenses is the ghosting. Both headsets do have this ghosting effect to them. Now, ghosting is probably the wrong word. Some people call it smear ghosting, but really, what it looks like is if you wear shades, or you were looking through a glass window and there was some smudge on it, and then someone shines at a bright light in it, you see like God rays coming through that thing. You notice it in high contrast scenes with both the Oculus Rift and the HTC VIVE. Now, the difference between the ghosting in the Rift with the VIVE is that the ghosting on the Rift is a lot more pronounced in terms of the amount of rays, or the thickness of the rays. On the Vive, what you get is you've got the concentric rings of the Fresnel lenses get highlighted, and you can kind of see the rings around the edges. You do get a little bit of ghost in the Vive. It's more at the edges of the lens rather than in the very centre of the lens or wherever the contrasting object is. On the Rift, wherever the contrasting object is, so if you had a big bright white thing in the centre and it's dark at the edges, it will radiate across from the centre all the way out. Now, it has to be said, I think a lot of games and or developers in general can avoid the ghosting by not having ridiculously high contrasting scenes. But you do notice it, and it does take you out of the experience a bit when it does happen. It reminds you that you're using a VR headset. With both the Vive and the Rift, I mean, both of them have this issue. With the Rift, I think it's a lot worse, though in scenes where it's not a problem, say you're actually playing something like Live for Speed or Elite Dangerous isn't too bad, it does do it a bit. Project Cars does it a little bit on the Rift. But if you're playing a normal game where you're actually looking at an entire scene that's filling up the whole view, it's not normally a problem on either headset. But I have to say, if I had to choose one over the other, I would choose the Vive ghosting effect over the Rift. But on both headsets, it's not perfect. And on both headsets, I think what would happen over time is, in general, you get used to it and you basically ignore it. So it's there. I'd say it's an annoyance, but it's VR day one, and we're early adopters, so it's something we're just going to have to get over. But the Vive, if I had to pick, does that better, or it's less of an issue with the Vive. Now, in terms of the actual screens on the devices, and this is actually something I don't think people, again, have talked about that much. The brightness of the screens on the Rift and the Vive. The Vive feels a lot brighter than the Rift, way brighter than the Rift, and to me, that I think it's quite a big impact in terms of feeling immersed, because the brightness in the Vive, in the right sort of scenes, if you're actually in a realistic type of game, makes it look like you're actually, though the resolution's low in general, in VR in general, makes it look like you're actually outside. For example, there's some photogrammetry scenes in the lab. The brightness is like reality. Whereas with the Rift, I've been playing the Climb quite a lot. The brightness just is, it doesn't, the contrast isn't like reality. And you do notice, if you go from headset to headset and you keep popping them across in a scene or a game that looks realistic. I've been playing a lot of Project Cars, which looks quite realistic at times. It's a lot brighter and more realistic because of the contrast in the Vive than the Rift. And I'm surprised more people haven't talked about that, because for me, that's a really big difference between the two devices. And for me personally, that makes quite a big difference in terms of the actual immersion. Now, with that said, in terms of image clarity, the sort of crispness and the pixels, the Rift does, probably because it's slightly lower field of view, we'll talk about that separate, but the Rift actually has a slightly crisper finish to the actual pixels. Because you can see the pixels in both headsets, but with the Rift, the pixels appear slightly smaller, and the pixels themselves are slightly less noticeable. With it, just basically, it sort of goes out of focus gradually into the distance. It looks blurred. You can very clearly see the pixels in both headsets, but the Rift is marginally sharper than the Vive in terms of the actual pixels. And where this has the biggest impact is when it comes to reading things like small text in a VR scene. If you're playing something that's not particularly optimized for VR, or you're looking at menus with text on them, the Rift is a bit clearer than the Vive. You'll notice this I think VR desktop, or when you're doing desktop applications, you notice that a lot more, that it's more clear with the Rift than the Vive. In general, though, in VR, I found you sort of just, if you can't read something in VR, you just move forwards. With the Vive, you're often playing it stood up. I've played both sat down and stood up because I like driving sims and flight sims. You generally, in both cases, if you can't read something on the screen, you just move forward. So it's not the end of the world with either case, but the Rift definitely has a slightly more crisp screen than the Vive, though in both cases, neither's gonna, in terms of raw resolution, neither's gonna blow you away. and I don't think that would be a overall deciding factor as to why you'd go for one headset over the other. Now, I almost forgot field of view. We'll talk about field of view a bit. The Vive has a much larger field of view than the Rift. And though this is really strange, actually, if you get the headsets out the box and you're just using them for the first time, and you could probably use them for weeks and not realise, you'll be like, okay, you put that on, yeah, it's pretty, it's pretty comparable field of view with the between the headsets. What you notice with the Vive though is that the foam is a lot thicker on the Vive. But if you take the foam off the Vive and place the Vive on your face, this isn't turned on at the moment, you place it on your face and you get your eyes right up to the lenses, you still can't see the edges of the screen. So for some reason, HTC have put these big foamy pads on that actually are detrimental to the quality of what you see with the headset. Not only in terms of without the foam on, hopefully someone does a custom thin foam, but with the foam off, not only do you get a wider field of view, it further increases the sweet spot in terms of how much leeway there is for the overall image to be in focus. So that's really bizarre that HTC did that, and I've tried both. It comes with a thick one and a thin foam, but they're both the same thickness. They just change how they sort of rest on your face. Really strange that they didn't bundle it with a thinner foam that lets you get the screens closer to your eyes, because that makes it a lot bigger difference. Also, with the foam on the Rift, what's nice about it, with the firmer foam, I noticed this going from headset to headset, having the firmer foam, means that the headset is more likely to just stay in one spot on your face. When you've got this soft foam on the Vive, what tends to happen is when you move, I'm not sure if we'll be able to see this in the video, but when you move with the Vive, this is going to be hard to sort of convey, but when you move and you've got weight on it, the way that you'll have compressed this against your face a bit, but then there's still a bit of loose foam on here. So what happens is that with it pushed down, there's a sort of little bit of give and wobble, and especially with the thicker foam, it causes the headset to be further out on your face, which increases the perceived weight of the headset as well. So I really think, if anything, where HTC have failed with the Vive is the choice of the foam and many aspects of the head strap, and how that then affects the actual quality of the lenses and the screen, and how it gets in the way of the field of view. So we'll sort of talk about it with the foam on, because I guess that's how most people are going to use it, and obviously modding, I'm sure, will take off for both devices. But with the foam on, the field of view is pretty much the same in both headsets, marginally bigger with the Vive, I'd say both vertically and horizontally. In terms of the image quality, well, not the image quality, but the quality of the field of view, I found without the box with the Rift, if I'm looking straight ahead, I can see the edges of the screen at times, especially if I've got it on tight. Whereas I could strap this to my face as if I'm going to try and sustain a nuclear bomb blast to the head, and I can't see the edge of the screen. As I say, once you take the foam off, then I can, if I've got it right up on my eyes, I can, when looking in certain directions, just about see the square edges of the screen. But the Vive definitely has with the foam off, a far wider field of view, which I think again really adds to the immersion. Actually, far more vertical field of view. Even with the foam off, the slightly wider field of view, but it's more about the vertical field of view being increased. To the point with the Vive, actually, when you've got the foam off, that you can't, if you're looking straight ahead, it's your full vertical vision, which I'd say is a pretty big selling point, but HTC completely negated it with the foam. Well done. It's the simple stuff that makes things worse. Unbelievable. And that gets us on to the last point I want to make in terms of the screens, kind of separate to field of view, and that is the nature of the 3D with the headsets, or the stereo separation. Now, it seems to me that both headsets, when they work fantastic in terms of 3D. When you're in the VR space and you move your head around, things look 3D. They look pretty much real and pretty solid. They both succeed in making it look very much like reality. However, I have noticed when having stuff closer to the face with the Oculus Rift that it's not quite as natural as the HTC VIVE in terms of the sort of 3D feel of things, or sort of noticing your nose or crossover of the screens. It's really hard to explain, and I'm not quite sure what is causing it. But to hazard a guess, now this could be wrong, I'll put a note on this if it is wrong, I get the impression that the VIVE might have more crossover of the screens in terms of both eyes cross over more, which probably means that then when stuff's close to your face, you're actually getting better stereo of objects closer to your face. I don't know if that's the case, but for whatever the reason is, when using the VIVE, the 3D just feels a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more believable. Whereas I say with the Oculus Rift, there's times where I think the 3D just feels a little bit off. But having said that, in most use cases, when playing most games or doing whatever, you're probably not going to notice it in general. But it does seem something that I think the VIVE does better. I'll have to do a little bit more research on that and work out why exactly that is, or if it's just me imagining things, which is entirely possible. Okay, in terms of actual usability of the headsets when it comes to interacting with the software and getting going with games, I'm going to start off in a sort of like-for-like situation with these headsets in terms of being sat down at your desk, having your head-mounted display at your desk, and then putting the headset on your display on your face, and then talking about what they like to use in that situation. Of course, the VIVE out of the box has the whole controllers and room scale setup as an option, but for the sake of doing a like-for-like comparison, until we get touch controllers with the Rift, we're just doing this as if we were sat down at a desk with a chair getting ready to go for VR. Now, once you've installed the software with the Oculus Rift, it's really nice and seamless in terms of, as soon as you put the headset on your head, it loads up into Oculus Home immediately. It's got a little light detector, you can see it there, it's got a little LED light that lets you know what's going on with the headset, but it's also got a little light sensitivity detector, so when you put it on your head, flashes straight into Oculus Home, literally immediate, and that is really beautifully done. And I'm not sure, maybe it's got some RAM in the headset or something that keeps it there, or maybe it's just because the background task is always running on a computer, but that is possibly one of the most impressive aspects of the Rift, and it makes the headset a lot more like just putting on a pair of headphones, for example, in that you've got it on your desk there, ready to go. You want to play a VR game or watch a VR video, and you're like, okay, grab my headset, stick it on, do the little wiggle fiddle, get the sweet spot right, but then you're there and it's done, and absolutely seamless and fantastic. With the VIVE, if you've got it on your desk, what you generally need to do is load into Steam VR, which if you've got your lighthouses already turned on and going, it will load into it immediately, and you then, with the VIVE on, you then go through the Steam VR menu and select what you want, launch it, and then get going. It doesn't take a long time with the VIVE, but it's nowhere near as seamless as the Rift. It's not a particular chore with the VIVE. I'm not saying it's terrible, but the Rift is literally lightning fast and immediate. So this, you're probably talking about a minute to get going with your given game. Now, with the VIVE, you do have the thing of it, obviously, the whole sort of design philosophy with the VR is it being for room scale with the two controllers that they use. You can use the Steam controller as well, but the general nature of the VIVE is designed around the idea that you're playing it with room scale. In that scenario, you're loading up Steam VR and you're putting the headset on and then you're using the controllers to pick things. It makes absolute perfect sense with how they've done this, and it's not particularly a burden. Where it is more of a burden, as I say, is if you've got these devices on your desk and you just wanted to pick one, stick it on your face to play a game from Steam, or from, in the case of Oculus, from the Oculus Home Library, or a little VR experience. It's a lot easier and faster to just stick the Rift on your head and get going. In terms of usability, it's hard to make a direct comparison between the two headsets. As I say, in terms of just being sat down at a computer, the Rift pips the Vive in terms of the immediacy of putting it on your head and it just turning on and just working, which is not a small feat to get going and to have working. So as I say, that's a really fantastic thing that Oculus have done. In terms of that aspect, the Vive is slower at doing that, a little bit more awkward, and you have to have your lighthouse set up. But then, separate to that, the Vive actually allows you to have full-on VR, you know, a holodeck in your house if you've got the space. Not everyone does in the United Kingdom, but if you've got the space, the Vive right now out of the box is a holodeck in your house, which is absolutely bloody amazing. Okay, so in conclusion, I was trying to find a good way to summarize each headset and to describe which is better for who and maybe which is better overall. And as I say, it's very difficult because the Rift, of course, doesn't have the hand controllers at this point in time. And as a result of that, what we've tried to do is keep the video more focused on the sort of head-mounted display specifics of the sit-down experience, the basic usability. We'll probably be able to do a better comparison once a Rift has hand controllers. Outside of that, there's also the issue of price, in that until the touch controllers come out, we don't know what the final price of the Rift will be over the Vive. But with that said and done, what I thought the best way to describe them is that to me, the Oculus Rift is the better consumer device in that it's easier to get set up initially, it's easier to have it on your desk and stick it on your head and load into a VR experience or a VR game, and everything's presented in a very simple and usable way. It's a very good, solid consumer product. The Vive, on the other hand, is a little bit more clunky to get on your face, a little bit more clunky to use in terms of when you first launch something through the Steam VR. You do have to set up your lighthouses, or even if you just set up a single lighthouse, there's a little bit of faff there, and it's not as polished as the Rift. With that said, I think in terms of virtual reality and making you feel as if you've got a holodeck in your place of living, the Vive provides that, or does that far better than the Oculus Rift. And in terms of being immersed in another reality, a virtual reality, again, the Vive does that better than the Rift. I also think that despite it coming across in many regards as a dev kit, the Vive will improve over time, not in the hardware, but I think in terms of mods, in terms of people modding the foam, in terms of the straps being replaceable, it's a lot harder. There's actual circuitry going through the Rift strap for this to be changed, whereas the strap and a lot of the aspects of the foam and the strap should be a lot easier to mod. So moving into the future, I think the comfort aspects will likely be addressed, though at more cost to the end user. But even more importantly, knowing what Valve are like with their software updates, I think the usability of the software side of the Rift is going to drastically improve, though it might take a good number of months. I dare say Rift out of Vive, the software of the Vive will improve over the next coming months. Now, there are still some shortcomings with the software of the Rift. At launch, for example, you can only install it to your C drive, and there are some clunky aspects of the software of the Oculus, and some things with the exclusives being a little bit irritating, and the prices on the stores being in dollars. So if you're in America, it's a perfect out of the box, ready to go consumer box. If you're not in America, there are still some niggles with it that I'm sure they'll polish up. So really, I think that pretty much covers most of the points. And hopefully, as I say, the objective of this wasn't to do a sort of versus battle to the death comparison. I really just wanted to cover points that I think other people have missed in their videos. And then, and I think that's what we've done reasonably well. For me, what people wanted to know is what I would prefer and what I would keep a hold of. I think as an enthusiast, and I think anyone that's spending £700 or £500, as an enthusiast, I would go for the Rift for the Vive. How many times have we done that? For the Vive over the Rift. I think the Vive, for me, the reason why I picked the Vive, I think the contrast of the screen is really important to me. I like the lenses, the nature of the ghosting on the lenses is more enjoyable to me because it's less noticeable. The strap annoys the hell out of me. And some aspects of the software annoy me, but I can look past them because once I'm actually got going with a VR title and I'm there, I don't care anymore. And I'm also looking forward to adjusting it a bit. But I'm very much on the enthusiast side of VR. You know, I've had the DK1, the DK2, and even used VR headsets going back into the 90s. So to me, I'm going for the mad scientist part of VR. I think anyone that bought a Vive would probably be really happy with it. I also think anyone that bought a Rift would be really happy with it. But there you go. I hope that helps. We probably missed stuff. Might have got some things wrong, but I think that'll do for now. We'll do another follow-up video after. If you want to ask questions in the comments, I can do a follow-up video and hopefully go over points that people want covered or things we might have missed. And also what I'll do is I'll actually do a separate video where I load up a game in both and go side to side in the video and then see if I can pinpoint things more precisely there. But thanks for watching this comparison versus information video on the Oculus Rift and the HTC VIVE. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Don't forget to like, and as I say, drop a comment. Thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.